All right, welcome to another episode of GLP's 10 out of 10. This is where we ask different designers from around the globe the same 10 questions. Some are inspirational, some are educational, some are off the wall, and some are just plain fun. Today we have with us multifaceted designer, New York-based Mike Baldassari. Mike is an award-winning and Tony and Emmy nominated lighting designer. He spans film, broadcast, television, theater, concert touring. Mike even has a Roscoe Lux gel named after him, Baldassari Blue, which is R381. Mike has worked on projects such as on Broadway, Children of a Lesser God, First Date, As Long as We Both Laugh, and Holler If You Hear Me. He has designed film credits for Rock of Ages starring Tom Cruise and the movie musical Nine. In concert touring, Alice in Chains, Fish, Neil Young, and many others. TV credits include David Letterman's Netflix special, U2, Bruce Springsteen, Carrie Underwood's Saturday Night Live, Late Night with Seth Meyers, U2's Top of the Rock performance on the premiere of The Tonight Show, where Mike was nominated for an Emmy, comedy broadcasts for Joe Rogan, Jay Romano, Dana Carvey, to name just a few. He has theatrical touring credits and international projects that include Monty Python's Spamalot, Man of La Mancha, The Music of Johnny Cash, Spider-Man Live, Beauty of the Beast in Europe, Blast 2 in Japan, and Cabaret in Paris. That's fantastic. Welcome, Mike.
Thanks for having me, Brian.
That's a mouthful there, my friend.
I've been, rowing uphill for a long time now.
There you go. And doing a great job at it.
Thanks.
So let's get to the 10 out of 10 questions, man.
Okay.
So what was your first job as a designer?
My first job, I'll say, in New York City as a designer, because I started when I was in high school doing stuff. But my first job in New York City, I did a little tiny show in an asphalt plant that you can still see from the FDR Drive. So it was on the way on the Upper East Side, and it was a little tiny show called Boogie Woogie and Booker T. And the funny thing about that is they did a taping for Lincoln Center and, the Lincoln Center Library. And recently I was there with my daughter who loves to go and, she loves to watch old shows and stuff like that. She's approaching college now. And we looked it up, and sure enough, it's in there. But it says in the comments section, it says something like, good taping, power goes out in the middle of Act 2. So that was my first New York show.
There you go. That's pretty cool. And you'll forever have the smell of asphalt in your memories.
Yeah.
So what was your most Spinal Tap or / embarrassing moment on a show that you're willing to tell us about?
Okay. I have two for you. The first one is I was doing the Broadway musical First Date, and I was lighting Zach Levi and Krista Rodriguez, and they were sitting and they're supposed to be frozen. And I put a couple of Sharpies onto Zach Levi. He's supposed to be frozen, right? So he was this bright thing, and the director says, "Can you make him a little brighter?" And I said, "Sure." So I added a few more Sharpies. And the next thing you know, I'm looking at him, and there's smoke coming out of his hair. So I quickly turned it off. Yeah. I was wearing a baseball hat. I went down there. I profusely apologized. And I said, "Zach, I'm so sorry." And I took my hat off. I said, "Look, it's happened to me a few times, but I'm really sorry." And all. He was totally cool about it. So the other Spinal Tap moment that I have that unfortunately also has to do with burning things is I, for a number of years, for Jules Fisher and Peggy Eisenhower, I was their lighting supervisor on Christmas Carol that was at Madison Square Garden. So at the theater at Madison Square Garden. Mm-hmm. And it was, anybody who ever saw it's an enormous production. It wrapped around the entire building. It was sort of like the equivalent of about 5 Broadway stages. And I was doing some of my cue notes. And the other thing is that building is just so big that sitting at the back of the theater and doing my cue notes, you're like a block away. Mm-hmm. So you can't really always tell what's going on stage. But I was just kind of quickly trying to go through my notes, and there was a drop in, And for a different scene, there was these 6 lights that were shadow projectors that were just, like a 1K work light, essentially, that made shadows. But this drop was in that they had just had repainted. So you can imagine, this is a drop that's like probably was 50 feet wide at least, and probably, 25 feet tall, that had just been repainted. So you can imagine what that cost.
Yeah.
And I hear somebody come out from one of the houses yelling, "Turn it off, turn it off." I went into the wrong queue. These 6 projector lights came on, and they burned 6 holes in this brand new drop.
Ooh.
So it was totally my mistake. And I had to profusely apologize to Tony for burning holes in his drops. So I'm not proud of it.
That one sticks around for a while.
Yeah, that wasn't so good. So, and Tony Walton is a incredible Broadway designer, production designer. Most people would know him as he was the production designer for the original Sound of Music and stuff. So incredible, brilliant designer. And he could not have been more gracious.
That's cool. That helps in a moment like that, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so question number 3. What's the best advice anybody's given you, either professional or otherwise?
Hands down, the best advice I ever got. I was in a doctor's office, and there was a Forbes magazine sitting on the table, and there was an interview with Alice Cooper. And I said, "What is Alice Cooper doing in Forbes magazine?" So I had to read it while I was sitting there. And one of the things that I read in there that he said was, "I made more money in real estate than I ever made in the music business." And that just, kind of set a light bulb off in my head. And so that led to me investing in real estate, and which I have done from the moment I could. I started when I was 25, and that has been absolutely the best advice I ever got. And the other advice I got after Tony Walton had forgiven me burning the 6 holes in his drop was I asked him about buying a second home for an investment. And he said to me, we bought a house back in the early 70s in Sag Harbor. And he said, the beauty of it is in flush times we enjoyed it, and in lean times we rented it out. And I think for our business, I think you have to get involved in real estate at some point in our business. So that is absolutely, hands down, the best advice I got was the Alice Cooper in Forbes magazine.
That's cool. That's good. On a professional level, what is your proudest achievement?
I have to say that I co-designed Cabaret with Peggy Eisenhower. She asked me to join her on it. And that by far, that led to a more than 20-year relationship with that show. It has taken me around the world. And I think that Cabaret is one of the great American musicals. And so to be involved for that amount of time with something that is that poignant, and I think it's as fresh this minute as it was the day that it started. And so to be able to do that and then that production was with these 2 guys that nobody knew at the time, named Sam Mendes and Rob Marshall. So Sam and Rob, we did this thing, and they turned into Sam Mendes and Rob Marshall. So that was a groundbreaking production that we got to do all over the world.
That's fantastic.
So on that alone, I think I have to defer to that.
That's great. That's a great story. So when you're not working, which you do quite often, what do you do in your downtime?
Well, look, to be very honest, on my downtime, I try to spend every minute I can with my family, because that is one of the parts, we all know that about our business, is how much time it takes us away from our family. So, I always say my 4 points is I'm a provider first, I'm a father second, I'm a husband third, and I'm a lighting designer fourth. But number 1 and number 4 are connected. Right. So I try my best when I'm not working to be involved as best that I can. I am very, very, very fortunate to have a family that supports me, my wife and my daughter. I wouldn't it would be impossible without them, without a doubt. In the pandemic, one thing that I learned how to do is I have a neighbor. We're out east right now. I have a neighbor who's a commercial fisherman. So the Downeaster Alexa, he's one of those. Billy Joel's song Downeaster Alexa. He's one of those guys. He's a bayman, and he has a trawler and all that kind of stuff. So I've run into him, and he said that the fish prices, with no restaurants open and schools closed, all that kind of stuff, fish prices have really taken a nosedive. So I said, well, I'll buy some fish from you. And he's a commercial fisherman. So he said, well, I can sell you fish, but they're whole fish. I can't fillet or scale it or anything for you. So I said, well, my family started with a fish store over 100 years ago in Hoboken. So maybe I have some of that in my blood. So he's been giving me fish. And so I've learned how to fillet fish and that kind of stuff. So that's
Awesome.
been my pandemic. Come out the other end. What's your new skill?
There you go. Bring it all back full circle.
Yeah, exactly.
That's great. So in all of your travels, what's the best venue that you've worked in?
Well, I have to break that down a couple of different ways. So I would say New York City, hands down, you have to put in there Radio City, Carnegie Hall. I did, in addition to other things, I did 20 of the CBS upfronts at Carnegie Hall. And certainly Madison Square Garden. It's Madison Square Garden, and there's something electric about being, in the middle of the city, in an arena with that many people. And, for Broadway, I've done 3 productions at Studio 54. So I think I have to say that's one of my favorite theaters. Concerts, I would say certainly Red Rocks, I'm sure is on a lot of people's list. The Gorge at George Washington. I have to say Garden State Art Center, because I live in New Jersey. We got to stick together. Television, 30 Rock. It's really cool to work at 30 Rock. Anybody who works there will tell you that. Just the history that's there, and again, you're in the middle of the city. In film, I have to say Shepperton Studios, where we did 9 in London. Just because of the incredible history that's there. So you're walking around and it's like, oh, that's the camera that Stanley Kubrick used, and that's the crane that Laurence Olivier used, and there's that kind of stuff that's just you pinch yourself and like, how did I get here?
Right.
And then New Jersey, I have to say, New Jersey Performing Arts Center, NJPAC in Newark, does not get enough credit. I think it's one of the best venues in the world. I feel like I've been all over the planet, and that right there in Newark, New Jersey is absolutely, NJPAC is one of the best, venues in the world. And like I said, Garden State Art Center, because it's a Jersey thing.
Right. That's great. Great local shout out, man.
Yeah.
Okay. So in this time of quarantine, what's the one album or artist that you couldn't do without?
I will say we stumbled across, going back to the Jersey centricness, Bruce Springsteen on XM radio, From His Home to Yours. We really love listening to his comments and observations about what's going on these days, and how he's processing all of the events going on in the world, and funneling it into the music that he picks. It's really cool. And he's a Jersey guy, so Jersey guys like me, we stick together.
Very cool. That's good. If you could go back in time, what advice would you give a teenage Mike Baldassari?
Do something else.
But invest in real estate.
Oh, yeah. Invest in real estate. But, I think it's very difficult to convey to people how difficult this business is. And here I am, I'm flattered when you introduced me with that. It's a very impressive list. But that list didn't just happen. I had a hustle for all of those jobs. And here I am, 33 years out of college, and I feel like I'm still hustling. My phone doesn't ring off the hook. I can go from job to job, but I don't end up turning a lot of jobs down. And I think maybe young people might find that a little hard to believe. If you just read that list of credits, it's like,
Right.
wow, that guy, he's popping. He's got stuff going on all the time. It's still a hustle,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's very difficult to convey. I think as a young person, there is a safety mechanism of being, kind of young and stupid. And I was the stupidest by far, and I do think there's a safety mechanism there, and I've always said this: if you wait until you think you can do something, you'll never do anything.
Right.
So, and then when I'm pushing my daughter, I say, well, how about entertainment attorney? Everybody needs one. They're never out of work. They get paid a lot of money, and certainly as I learn more about how the business of show business works,
Mm-hmm.
There's not a lot that gets started in our business without an attorney being involved.
Right.
So I wish somebody had, beaten my head a little bit more about how tough it was going to be.
The keyboard player in Leonard Skinner, that's what he pushed his son into. That's exactly what he does.
Attorney.
All right. So if you could sit down and have a cup of coffee with one person, present or past, who would it be?
I have to say, hands down, John Lennon. First off, the guy was 40 when he died.
Yeah.
And it's like the amount of stuff that guy did. The other person who also, when I turned 40, I kind of looked at like, what did some other people do at this point? Martin Luther King Jr. was 39 when he was killed. And you look at those two guys and you're like, wow. It's like,
right.
I haven't done anything.
Right.
We look at what those folks accomplished. That was the two that stuck out. When I was 40 and I kind of did that observing or, did a little self-reflection. I mean, I had been a fan of John Lennon since I understood music. I also think that when you look at all he did, I always admired his advocacy, his activism. Here, that was somebody who really tried to use his celebrity to change the world for good.
Right.
And then, as people always say, look at all the, think about all the great music that we've missed out on, So I think, but that's the thing, that was somebody who really, way before I think it was like cool, he
Right.
really tried to advocate for people who didn't have enough of a voice and stuff. So I would love to just like hang out and ask him some questions, and he would probably tell me I was a dope or whatever. So,
but it would be an entertaining cup of coffee.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like, with somebody like that, you can really go deep on what are the issues in our country and why can't we fix these, and why have these systemic problems been, and I'm not just talking about what's in the news right now, but the kinds of problems that we've
just
had.
life in general, right?
Just life in general. Yeah. And having somebody with a different perspective, the one quote that I always loved from him was, they asked him when he was in school, when he was a youngster, what do you want to be when you grow up? And his answer was happy. And it's like, it's a different way to look at it.
Right.
Most people would say, oh, I want to be a fireman. I want to be a doctor. He said, happy. And so I've always admired people who look at it from a different angle. And I feel like I've tried to surround myself with people who look at things from a different angle and don't necessarily agree with me.
Right.
I'm also an Italian from New Jersey, so I love to argue. So
there you go. All right. So our final question, Mike, your country's called you up for the Olympics, winter or summer. What sport are you going to compete in?
All right. Well, nothing involved getting cold. I can tell you that. When I was in college, I had the best summer job in the world. I worked for a women's softball team sponsored by a beer company. And that was an eye-opening experience. with some really incredible athletes.
Mm-hmm.
I ended up working like as an announcer and an assistant coach, but I also kept the beer cold, you know, the important jobs.
Mm-hmm. The good
But,
job.
but, you know, to be around those people at that level of talent and stuff is really awe-inspiring. And people who work
Mm-hmm.
that hard and, you know, admiring work ethic and seeing what it really takes, you know, it's like all of these things, you know, we also learn. I tell people all the time, it must be cool. You meet these rock stars and all that stuff. Yeah, but you know how hard they work? You know, it's not. So I felt like the softball team thing was a really, cause it's at a different level, you know, and it's a very, very fast game. Women's, fast pitch softball is a very, very fast game because the field is smaller and stuff. So everything is much faster than in baseball.
Mm-hmm.
And I was fortunate enough that I knew a bunch of women players who went on to be in the Olympics. And one of my friends became the coach for the Olympic team and stuff like that. So I would be more than happy to reprise my role as the guy who keep in the dugout, keeping the beer cold.
Keeping the beer cold. Perfect.
Yeah. But I don't mean that. I'm just saying that as a joke. I have really nothing but the highest respect for the people who train, how they train and get to that level is very, very impressive. And again, it's the same thing. It relates to our business. You know, nobody just got there by accident. You know, all the people, all the celebrities that you get to work with, they all work their ass off. So
laser focus.
Yeah.
Well, fantastic. Well, thank you, man. I
My pleasure.
appreciate it. It's always great to see you.
Same here.
And be well.